Hello, Unitarian Universalists. I'm the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, president of your Unitarian Universalist Association. It is so good to be with you for another season of Ingathering. This time marks the end of summer when we come together to renew our commitments to each other, to our Unitarian Universalist communities, and to begin another vital year of ministry. In the summer months, I hope that you and your loved ones found some time to rejuvenate your bodies and spirits, to rest, to enjoy the long summer days, to pursue hobbies that bring you joy. I know that the world is all too much, and it matters that we take time to rest. For rest is necessary for the quality of our lives, of our ministries, and of our spirits. We are all living in what I have come to call a liminal time, a time in between. The pandemic has upended so much. After 2 years plus of virtual and hybrid gatherings in our congregations, the ways in which people connect to religious community has broadened, and new patterns are still emerging. On so many levels, what comes next is still unfolding and being imagined. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to care for each other and to create resilient, theologically imaginative spiritual community that sustains us and inspires us as we navigate what's to come and what is needed. And there is so much needed. From support access to reproductive care to showing up through UU the Vote to elect leaders that will work to protect our children, our planet, our future, and our deeply held values. It also matters that we attend to doing the fundamentals of religious community, like supporting children and families recovering from, and in some cases still experiencing, the collective trauma of the last few years. Our world needs our message of love and justice. Our world needs brave, bold, and loving communities that are in the struggle for equity, dignity, and compassion. One way to join with your sibling Unitarian Universalists in this work is through UU the Vote. You can find out more at uuthevote.org. Your Unitarian Universalist Association is the embodiment of the covenant that all of our congregations make to each other to support each other. And the UUA is here because of your commitment to make and support and amplify our values, to support each of our congregations in their time of need, and to be more than any of us are alone. At the UUA, we are committed to being steadfast partners with you in this liminal time and in all that is ahead. As you gather in this sacred hour and join again in community, may we each remember the hundreds and thousands of Unitarian Universalists that are gathering all across our association, celebrating and calling themselves back into the power and the possibility of faithful community. For we are not alone, and we make each other strong. I send you my love and my blessings as we enter this new congregation year and celebrate Ingathering. Much love and deep care to all of you.
Our opening words this morning are by the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin, who is just now starting her first year as senior minister at All Souls Unitarian in Indianapolis. Come, let us enter this space of hope and community. Come, let us enter this space with our sorrows, our joys, our passion and compassion. Come, let us enter this space with the stories of our ancestors, for their strength and wisdom beats in our hearts. Come into this space present to the beloved companions who move beside us. Come into this space mindful that together we are building a future for other generations. Come into this space and let us worship. We'll begin with the choir. So welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln on this Sunday morning, the first of our new congregational year. Here we say we aspire to be a loving community, uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and to transform the world. My name is the Reverend Oscar Sinclair. It is a pleasure to be with you here this morning. The faith that we proclaim from this pulpit begins with this: all are welcome, all are beloved. So no matter who you are, where you are on life's journey, wherever you are going, you are welcome this morning. To put it simply, all means all, no exceptions. This is also an all ages service. And so when I say all means all, no exceptions, I also mean whatever your age. We also might say, for those of us who are more advanced in years, slightly, that the sound of a healthy church is the sound of children laughing. And so every time we gather for all ages services, it's important to just start with a reminder that that is the case. That if we hear children in worship, that is joyful noise. I have a 4-year-old. I know it's hard to remember that that is joyful noise sometimes. Hi, kiddo. But it is, and we are glad to be together. We say that we are about the work of transformation in this place, transforming ourselves and the world. So it's our hope, it's our expectation that we change from our experiences here, and that we work to change the world around us, and that in doing so we might find this community itself changed. Labor Day is the first Sunday of fall, but it is also perhaps the last Sunday of summer. And over this past summer, we engaged in an 8-week process of deepening our understanding and relationship with the native history and people of this place where we gather. At the end of that process, we developed this statement, a first draft, that will change and evolve even as we change and evolve. As we gather this morning, we acknowledge the land and the peoples who have called this place home for hundreds of years. The Oto Missouria, the Omaha, Ponca, Kanza, and Pawnee have all lived here at one time. Many others have visited in order to collect salt at the local salt basin. Niskithe, by which this area continues to be known, is the Omaha word for salt water. We thank them all for their good care of this sacred ground. We also take this opportunity to reject the doctrine of discovery, a theological and legal concept that paved the way for the degradation of native inhabitants and the unlawful appropriation of the land. We recognize that we continue to benefit from these past actions. And while we cannot change the past, we are committed to right relationship with our native neighbors. Indigenous peoples of many nations make their home in Lincoln today. We value their contribution to our community's vitality and diversity. And these are not idle words. Our commitment is to action. We pledge to show up in support of local and national policies, programs, and measures that demand redress for lands taken, that offer justice for harm committed, and that seek to promote self-determination and equity for all peoples. So we begin our worship as Unitarian Universalists by lighting a flaming chalice. The flaming chalice has moved over there, so I'm wondering if I can ask a choir member to come up and light the chalice as we read these words together. Roger Geary will come light our chalice. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. We are a church of open minds. We are a church of loving hearts. We are a church of helping hands. Together, we care for our earth and work for justice and peace in our world. We're gathered for water communion this morning, and so our first hymn is not in the hymnal. It's a song by Carolyn McDade, who wrote Spirit of Life and several other hymns in our hymnal, but she also wrote this one because Carolyn McDade was part of the very first water ceremony in 1980. This song and the theme for our worship this morning, as rivers to the sea coming home, come from that service. So will you please join me in singing our opening hymn, Coming Home, by Carolyn McDade, if you would rise in body or in spirit. I believe the choir is also leading us in this.
If anyone would like to come forward for the story so you can see the pictures, you're welcome to do so now, although it will be just for the story since we need room for the choir to be up here later. So come on up for the moment. We have some ocean animal stickers that are taking attention over there that are very exciting. And if anyone would like to grab ocean animal stickers for the rest of the service, you're welcome to do so. I think our ushers have some as well. Our story today is called The Cycle That Connects Us. And it is written by Molly Hosh-Gordon and Jamila Batchelder. As I tell this story, I'd like for you to be thinking about where water comes from and where water has been. Can you think about that in your brain as I tell the story? Rain falls upon the surface of the earth, and pulled by gravity, each drop begins to flow downhill. Drop merges with drop, flowing together into a trickle, a streamlet, a creek, a mighty river flowing onward. Some of the water seeps down into the earth itself as groundwater or deep aquifers where it will stay for days, years, or even millennia until it's pulled up again by tree roots, wells, springs, and geysers rejoining the dance, the flowing, flowing, flowing. The water flows on until it collects in ponds, lakes, seas, and vast oceans, and all the while the sun's rays warm the water, calling it back into vapor, so light that it can rise up, 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 each molecule moving on its own again, rising into the higher atmosphere, buoyant and swirling up to where the air grows cool, and the water vapor slows and cools and begins to turn again back to droplets. Droplets find droplets and join together again and again, forming clouds, growing heavier and heavier until at last the weight of them pulls them down again and rain falls on the surface of the earth again. Everywhere on earth, at every moment, is somewhere in this cycle. Cycles upon cycles, falling, flowing, sinking, transforming, rising again and again and again. Our planet has all the water it will ever have and has ever had. This water cycle has been spiraling around and around for more than 4.5 billion years. This means that the water we gather in our annual water communion ritual from all over the world or from our kitchen sink comes from the earth, from across all time. The water we gather today has traveled through the root systems of trees long since returned to soil, burst from geysers that ceased spraying millennia ago, and flowed from rivers that have changed course entirely over billions of years. This morning, we also remember that the water cycle doesn't only involve rivers and plants and clouds, but also involves creatures. The water cycles through us, too, coming in and out of our bodies in many different ways. That means that the molecules in the water, from Pawnee Lake or Branched Oak or the fountains at the sunken gardens, could have been in the tears of joy and sorrow cried by the first person who ever felt love. Or that water from our church sink contains within it molecules that were once in the best chicken soup someone ever ate. Or in the sweat of the people who built our church and our city. Or in the blood of the mothers that birthed our grandmothers, grandmothers, grandmothers. Or even in a dinosaur sneeze. So, what and when and where else do you imagine this water has been, do you think? What would you like to share? Yeah, where else has water been? Or where does it come from?
It may not just be of a terrestrial
It might be a celestial origin. Mhm. It could be from celestials. Where else has water come from or been or is a part of? Adults as well? Anyone? Water can come from waterfalls. That's right. Like you see in the picture, yeah. What else? Yeah. From the roots of trees. There you go. Great answer. From aquifer. Water has been all over and is in nearly everything. Water is life. Water remembers. Water sustains us and connects us. As we gather the waters of community this morning, let us remember that they connect us to everything that has ever been and everything that will ever be. That is the power of the water we share. Isn't that amazing? See wide-eyed children looking up at me. Thank you so much. That is the end of our story. You may go back to your seats, and you can take your stickers with you and keep doing that.
Hi. Do you want to sit up here for a minute? So one of the reasons that we come together every week is to share with each other what's going on in our lives. We do this because we know that when we're sad, it's good to be with other people, to tell them why we're sad and to sometimes get a hug in return. And we gather together to share why we're happy, because it is good to be happy together. So in a moment, sorry.
Savor that moment.
So Stacy is in DC right now for a work conference. Ailish, can you go to your classroom, please? Okay, maybe I'll bring her to class during the next song. Anyway, in this moment, we're going to invite you to share the things that make you sad. So if you would speak them into this shared space while I attempt to get my 4-year-old to go to her class. What are the things that are making us sad today? Ailish is sad. Well, I think she wants to go to the playground. What else? Pakistan? Jackson. If you are on the live stream, feel free to type your joys or your sorrows into the chat, and I will repeat them back to this room. I'm sorry, I didn't. Lena. Wena. There was one more that I didn't hear. Wes. Sorrow is not the only piece. What is giving us joy this morning? What makes us happy?
This glorious day.
This glorious day.
Little children in the service.
Little children in the service.
The choir is back.
The choir is back, yes.
Our grandchild, Avi, turns 8 today.
Avi turns 8 today.
Our youngest daughter's 37th birthday is tomorrow.
Marcia and
Anxiously awaiting
Oh my goodness. Marcia and Ray's daughter is 37 and anxiously awaiting her first child.
The Sunken Gardens Art Show is next Saturday.
The Sunken Gardens Art Show is next Saturday. There are many, many joys and many sorrows. This one from Pam Wakeman on the live stream. Sad and glad. Surgery to remove a tumor on my kidney this Thursday. We know, too, that there are joys and there are sorrows that are too deep to be spoken aloud yet, but are no less deeply held because of it. For all these, we hold a moment of silence. Amen. Will you join me in singing our next hymn, number 123 in the gray hymnal, Spirit of Life? If you would, rise in body or in spirit. One of the joys of this summer was bringing two new folks onto the church staff team. We're highlighting both of them over the course of this fall, but this morning, the membership umbrella is welcoming Liz Bonnie Heerman as our new membership manager.
Move this down a little bit first. Good morning. I have the pleasure of introducing you to our new membership manager, Liz Bonnie Heerman. And she joined the Unitarian Church of Lincoln in 2010. She's volunteered in the RGL wing, and she did Youth in Action program with the youth at one point, and she's been on the Board of Trustees. You've seen her serving coffee once or twice. And let's see, she's tried her hand at singing in the choir. That didn't go quite so well.
I want to be a soprano, but I am not.
In her other work life, she works as a social worker for KVC. Her title is Licensing Specialist, and she recruits families to become foster parents, and she works with the foster parents to create strong family bonds for those foster people that, the children that they're fostering. Liz and her wife, Mandy, and I saw Mandy somewhere, there she is. She sings in the choir, have two adult children, Jordan and John, two puppies, Howard and Hazel, and two amazing grandchildren, Gus and Violet. You got to wonder about this a little bit, right? The puppies before the grandkids? Well, just teasing.
Andy helped me write this, so that's why those puppies are in front.
And they have amazing critters, too, grand critters, she says. She loves to scrapbook, make cards and organize anything she can get her hands on. She can come to my house anytime. The Container Store is her friend, and let's see, some things she might know, and some things you might not know about Liz. She prefers her Oreo cookies with water. Watching cleaning, decorating, and unboxing videos. She learned to love Legos and everything bagels at the early age of 40. She likes horror movies and strange things, and she likes the classics too, particularly an A&A version of Pride and Prejudice. She loves traveling and visiting museums, and in fact, she and Mandy exchanged rings for the first time in Paris. Now, I'd like you to please come out and, after the church service, enjoy a cookie, and hosted by the Membership Umbrella Committee. You can find out a little bit more about us at the same time. But take some time to get to know Liz and chat with her about her new job here. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. I will be brief. I just wanted to say we are starting a starting point class that's going to begin on September 12th. And that is definitely for newcomers who'd like to know more about Unitarian Universalism, but also for people who are already members. If you just want to come in and meet some new people or revisit your own journey, we would love to have you there. It is a 4-week commitment. However, if 1 week doesn't work, just talk to me and we'll make it happen. But it's definitely a great experience for you all to try and to kind of just help you along your journey and find out if our fellowship will get you there. So I hope to see you there. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Appreciate it.
Each week, as part of our worship service, we take up a collection to support this congregation and our partners in the world. We do this because we each benefit from participating in this congregation in ways seen and unseen, and we each give back to this congregation, either through time, talent, treasure, or simply being here on Sunday morning. So as the choir sings this next piece, the offering will be gratefully received.
when I first realized it was real and serious was when the first Nebraska death was announced. And at first the name didn't register with me, and then I realized, wait a minute, I know that name. I know that guy.
Like, I remember writing in my reflection in my calendar that we got an extra week of spring break, and my sister came home from college, and I remember thinking, yeah, it's so crazy because they're saying that we're gonna have this lockdown thing for like a month.
And in 2 days, I lost the business because the organization that housed this group determined that they were going to immediately cease all contractor clients and all part-time employees. I was a contractor.
I remember at work when they sent us home, they said, oh, it's probably going to be 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, no, it's not.
We would push meals to him across the floor with the same big stick that you used to prop up the window of the wayside pulpit. I was at the time the possessor of that big stick, and I would push meals across the floor to him, and we would stay a long way apart. We were very, very concerned.
I remember trying to seek out certain individuals and saying, let's take over some garden produce for so-and-so. And I remember receiving some toilet paper in return. I thought, that's perfect. I remember thinking about kind of a joke about the shortage of toilet paper and run. Yeah, I say, this is great. We traded a butternut squash for 2 rolls of toilet paper.
My preferred mode was to go to Sufa Saver at 4 a.m. when there was nobody around, and sort of like literally never be in the same aisle as anyone else.
All the signs in my neighborhood, because it was it was kind of like living, like we will make it through this. There were signs like that. There was somebody in my neighborhood who had a sign that was counting the number of people who had COVID and had died. And so I think those sort of images will stick in my mind.
Yeah.
Working in the office and the building was just incredibly emptier feeling than when you're just in on a Saturday morning and no one else is here. It was empty because it was empty. And it felt hollow, and it echoed differently, and it felt, oh my goodness, when will we be together again? It was very weird.
What is something you have learned about yourself during the pandemic?
I'm a true introvert. I mean, I can be okay at home, and unfortunately, I'm okay with being alone at home. And I learned that I really do enjoy reading.
Unlike you, I am not as introverted as I thought I was. I was one of the early people to return, and I didn't return full time in July of 2020, but I had a split schedule between home and going to work because I needed contact with people. And even though I might not talk a lot with them or what, I needed that change.
It's an amalgamation of memories. It's my husband working from home for the first full year of it. And in all of our almost 20 years together, we'd never done that. We really came to know one another in a new and deep and abiding way.
And church was really, getting back to that question, church was a grounding force for me through that. I didn't have to talk about it. I just knew that I could show up either at a open circle or a board meeting, which actually was quite lovely. Even though we were on Zoom, everybody came with the same experience. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of equal there, and we could check in with whatever we wanted to share.
Just being able to watch the YouTube services, to hear that message of community and connection and hope. And then I taught several of the Zoom Sunday school sessions for the K-5 students, and it was so wonderful to be able to just still connect with those children of our church and share stories and songs together. So definitely a connection place, and then I guess a respite from the craziness of being a teacher and a parent, and just the overwhelm, and just to realize that I wasn't alone, I guess, because otherwise the worry is just overwhelming.
I think my spirituality, my faith is very important to me, particularly as a hospice nurse, as someone who has survived cancer twice. And so feeling like I'm home at this church, which I hadn't felt, I don't know if I ever felt that way before, it's played a big role.
It felt to me like we had a wonderful team. Everybody stepped up, and we learned all kinds of talents that we didn't know that people had. I guess the image that has stuck with me over the last 3 years is how our team rose to the occasion.
There's a Sufi folk tale about a river flowing to a sea. The river is drawn to the ocean. It has a sense of where it is going. The path from the headwaters in the mountains down to the ocean is not an easy one. At times it passes through peaceful meadows. At times the river has to carve through rock to form deep canyons. But all is well, the story goes, until the river comes to the desert. Here, the river cannot continue as it has. The only way through is to let go, to evaporate, to become one with the wind before falling as rain on the other side of the desert. This is the third ingathering we've held during the COVID-19 pandemic. Maybe you remember them. In September of 2020, we were starting what we knew was going to be our first year as an online church. We had a fully online congregational retreat with educational events, social opportunities, a game night, and a modified water communion on Zoom that kicked off the congregational year. Last year, in September of 2021, we had begun the summer on a high note. We returned to our building in April, and with vaccines available, we spent the summer of 2021 imagining a kind of return to normalcy in the fall, before the Delta and then the Omicron variants forced us to rethink our perhaps overly optimistic reentry plans. We spent much of last year with masks on, asking the congregation to stay home at the height of the variant-driven waves. So as we gather again, now in September of 2022, the role of the pandemic in shaping congregational life is changing. With all of our members and all of our children now able to be vaccinated, with our multi-platform system well established, we can be more flexible in how we respond to changing case rates. So rather than closing our building again, we're depending on each family to decide how they want to engage. If they want to be here in person, if they want to be online, if they want to be some combination of the two. The theologian Walter Brueggemann speaks of how faith progresses in a life, from orientation to disorientation to new orientations, new ways of being faithful. He talks about how traumatic or difficult events fundamentally disorient us, leading us to lament and confusion before eventually coming out the other side different than where we started. A new orientation rather than going back to the original orientation. The river does not reach the sea the same way it begins. At time as vapor up in the clouds passing over the desert is what Susan Frederick Gray calls liminal time, the transition between what has been and what is yet to be. So while this congregational year may look more normal than the last two that have preceded it, it is still liminal time. It's not a realistic goal to stand up here and say that we are going back to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln as it existed in the fall of 2019. We have been changed, collectively and individually, by the events of the last 3 years. Every fall, as we gather for a new congregational year, we mark this coming together by pouring water into a common vessel. This is, as Unitarian Universalism goes, a relatively established and beloved ritual. It started in the early 1980s as part of the feminist movement in Unitarian Universalism that was also closely associated with the development of our current 7 principles. The ritual is simple. Each participant brings water to the service, pouring it into the central vessel. The theme of that first service in 1981 was coming home like rivers to the sea. Over the years, it has become a part of our in-gathering service at this church and in many across the country. As we join together as a community, we bring each of our individual experiences to the whole. We gather as individuals, but also as an interconnected web, as a community. So in a few minutes, I'll invite you to come forward and pour water into this central bowl. But before I do that, I want to take a moment to talk about one of the other ways we're sharing our stories with each other this fall. What you heard was a brief preview of the project that I'm about to talk about. One of the ways I've spent the last 3 years is by working my way through a Doctorate of Ministry program in church leadership at Wesley Theological Seminary. It's been an opportunity over the course of the pandemic, and I mean over the course of the pandemic. I started in May of 2020 to regularly check in with interfaith colleagues around the country and to engage with literature and research around theology, so Walter Brueggemann, and how congregations change. After 2 years of coursework, I'm spending this year writing my thesis, and hopefully will graduate in May. Now, the DMIN is one of the great acronyms in the English language. Ministers go back to school and get their DMIN degree. Anyway, moving right along. A Doctor of Ministry degree is a professional degree. So rather than purely academic research, the thesis that you do at the end of it is an opportunity to develop a project at the congregation you serve, and then reflect on its impact. So as I've been putting together the proposal for my project this summer, I've been reflecting on the last several years that we've had as a congregation. How so many of us right now are articulating a feeling of disconnection from each other and our institutions. I think at least part of that comes from the nature of the last several years. The experience of the pandemic was universal in its impact. It happened to all of us. But it is deeply personal in its lived experience. It happened to each of us in different ways. Just in this community, our young families and elderly homebound folks have both suffered, but in wildly different ways. While we have been responding to the pandemic, the trauma of the last few years goes well beyond it. Parallel to the pandemic, we've also been reckoning with the legacy of white supremacy, both in our country after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and in our own congregation through the Beloved Conversations program. Unlike the pandemic, this is not work that suddenly started in early 2020, but our engagement with it has deepened in the last 3 years. Each of us is carrying stories from this time, and each of our stories is different. So the project that came out of all this wondering is deceptively simple. Find a way for this community to hear each other's stories. I sit in that office every week, and you come to me. All individuals. I have heard so many stories in these last years, and each time I want to say, how do we hold this as a community? This is too big for any one of us. So if you are a regular NPR listener, you can probably guess at how this works. It's like StoryCorps. Over the next few weeks, after the worship service, you're invited to sit down with one other congregant after service, one-on-one. It could be somebody you know well. It could be a complete stranger. And there's a voice recorder, like this one, in a box, as well as directions for how to turn on the voice recorder, and then 6 questions to ask each other. We'll record all of these stories and then archive them at the church. The ones of triumph over adversity, the ones of loss and isolation, the stories of pandemic, the stories of protest. And then in November, we'll share those stories, like we did this morning briefly, in a worship service, as part of an oral history of the pandemic years at the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. We'll also archive all of those stories, both as audio and as written transcripts, so that in 50 years, when people look back and say, what was it like at the Unitarian Church of Lincoln those couple years? We'll have an answer. Not an answer summarized by somebody from the pulpit, but an answer of everybody telling their stories. This is what it was like. This was my life in those years. So back to Walter Brueggemann. Walter Brueggemann writes that an important part of moving towards a new orientation, of moving through lament, is articulating the disorientation, saying aloud what happened. And you do that not to dwell on what happened, but to rebuild the foundation of our community for whatever comes next. Our experiences change us. Just as a river must become a cloud to pass over a desert, our community has changed, even as we continue on. Each of us has changed, even as we continue on. So by telling the stories of those years crossing the desert, we'll be better able to move towards what we are called to. I hope that you will join us in that work. But as a first step, we have a bowl, and we have water. This is a very simple version of a water communion. In a longer version, I would have asked you all to bring water from a place important to you. In 2018, we did that, and people brought water from vacations they'd had, from gardens that they'd grown, from hospitals. We're not doing that during the pandemic because a lot of us haven't gone very far. But if you have brought water, that's wonderful. Please use it. If you have not, as I have not, you're invited to pour water from these pitchers into this common vessel. So as Bill plays this next song, you're invited to come forward. Just like the women who participated in the first UU water service 42 years ago, we're marking a coming home of a kind this morning. Rather than joining water from all the places that we've been, today we are joining our stories. All the ones we've carried alone for these last years into one community. That is the work of the church, whether through water or recording. Please join us. So in 1961, as Unitarians and Universalists were merging to form something new, they sung together. The hymn for that first year together was "As tranquil streams that meet and merge." There's a line in it that feels important this morning. Marion Franklin Ham wrote it about the growing relationship between the Unitarians and Universalists, and wrote, "A freedom that reveres the past but trusts the dawning future more." So we've been talking about history this morning, about the stories that we carry. But let's be clear about this. We're telling the story about what happened, not to stay there, but so that we can face that dawning future together. So if you would, please rise in body or in spirit and join me in singing hymn number 145, as Tranquil Streams. We'll try that again. Okay. I've been informed that princesses are beautiful. So here's where I get to be a cruise director for a couple minutes. We're drawing this worship service to a close, but we have a lot of moving pieces about to start that I hope that you will stay for. First, in the gallery just outside here, the membership umbrella is serving cookies and refreshments to welcome our new membership manager, Liz Bonnie Heerman. So that's in the gallery, just here. Second, we're rolling out this oral history project. We piloted this last weekend at the board retreat with about 7 pairs of people. That's what you heard this morning as part of worship. There are 4 stations across this church: in the library, the high school room, the middle school room. All those you can get to from the gallery. And then the 4-5 room down in the religious education wing. Each room has a recording device in it, a box with a recording device and instructions in it, as well as a sign-up sheet on the door. So we're going to have at least 2 of these stations open for the next 6 Sundays. So if you don't want to do it today, there are other times to do it, but I would encourage you to do it now if you can, while it's fresh and while there are lots of people here. If you're watching online or are here now and have more questions about how all this works, please reach out, email me, call me, wave at my office on a Tuesday afternoon. This is, in addition to a really exciting project for the church, it is also the thing that I need to do for my thesis, so I am very invested in getting every question answered quickly. And then last, Chelsea has a collaborative water art project going on in the gallery, so I suspect that's where at least my 4-year-old will be during coffee hour. There's also an RGL committee meeting happening in the gathering place. I think that's it. There's a lot. So with that, I will say go in peace. But before you do, listen to the choir as they sing our benediction.